This episode of the Endpoints of View podcast is brought to you by Sentry Bay, home of the Armored Client, the world's most advanced endpoint protection.
Okay, so it seems like every week, maybe even every day, there's another headline, right? Another big data breach. And, lately, it feels like healthcare is just constantly in the crosshairs.
It really does. You see these huge numbers, hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of people affected.
Yeah, but it feels a bit abstract, doesn't it? Like, what does it actually mean when all that data gets out?
Exactly. That feeling of what are the real consequences, that's what we're diving into today.
Right.
We're looking specifically at two pretty significant recent ones. Ascension, that impacted over 430,000 people, and VectraRx, which hit about, 109,000?
Wow, those are big numbers.
They really are. And these aren't just numbers, It's personal, very sensitive information suddenly at risk.
Right. So we've looked at the reports. These are from May and March this year, trying to get past the headlines, figure out, how did this happen? What exactly got exposed?
And maybe why healthcare keeps getting hit so hard.
Yeah, exactly. Our mission here is basically to pull out the really critical stuff for you, the things you need to grasp. So where should we start? Maybe the scale of these two.
Sounds good. Let's start with Ascension. Over 430,000 people. That scale alone is, it's huge.
It really is.
And what's really interesting, or maybe worrying, is where it started. It wasn't directly Ascension, but a former third-party vendor.
A vendor, okay.
Yeah, someone they used to work with. And their system had a software vulnerability that got exploited. It's like a weak link in the chain,
Right. So even if Ascension's own security was maybe pretty good, this partner's issue pulled them down.
Precisely. It just shows how interconnected everything is and how much risk comes with relying on partners.
It's a huge reminder, isn't it?
Yeah.
Your security isn't just your security. Okay, then there's VectraRx, smaller numbers, just over 109,000, but still significant. What stood out there?
Well, the timeline on that one caught my eye. They spotted unusual activity way back in December 2024.
December, okay.
But they didn't confirm someone actually got in until early January. And then they didn't tell the public until February.
So wait, that's like weeks?
Yeah.
A month or more where attackers might have been inside?
Potentially, yeah. That's a pretty wide window.
Wow.
And, the longer attackers are in a system, the more time they have to look around, find the valuable stuff, copy it, maybe even cover their tracks.
Which makes knowing what data they got even more critical.
Absolutely. So let's talk about that. For Ascension, the list is, it's extensive.
Like what?
Full names, addresses, phone numbers, emails, birth dates, even race and gender.
Okay, that's already a lot.
But then it gets worse. Social security numbers.
Oh, no.
Insurance details, admission information, medical record numbers, even billing codes. It's basically like a complete map of someone's interaction with the health system.
That is incredibly comprehensive.
Yeah.
So much sensitive stuff in one place.
It really is. And the problem with that kind of data, social security numbers, medical history, is that it doesn't expire like a credit card number.
Right, you can't just cancel your social security number.
Exactly. So the risk for identity theft, insurance fraud, things like that, it lasts for years, maybe forever. That long-term value is a big part of why healthcare data is such a target.
Okay, that makes sense. What about VectraRx? What kind of data leaked there?
Similar basics, full names, social security numbers, dates of birth. But the really sensitive part there was prescription information.
Prescription details, like what drugs people are taking.
Yeah, prescription numbers, the details of the medication, and the dates they got it filled.
Wow. That feels incredibly personal. You could use that for, targeted scams or just revealing really private health conditions.
Absolutely. It's highly sensitive. So, okay, we see the scale, we see the sensitivity. Let's zoom out a bit. Why healthcare? Why is it always seemingly under attack?
Yeah, what makes it such a magnet?
Well, we touched on one big reason already. The data itself is just super valuable on the dark web. Medical records, SSNs, they fetch a higher price than financial data.
Because they last longer, like you said.
Exactly. Then there's the issue of IT infrastructure. A lot of healthcare organizations are dealing with older systems, legacy systems.
Right, like outdated software maybe?
Yeah, outdated software, complex systems that are hard to update without disrupting patient care. It can be a massive undertaking, so vulnerabilities sometimes linger.
It sounds like trying to bolt modern locks onto an old crumbling door.
Kind of, yeah. And then there's regulation. Healthcare is heavily regulated, like with HIPAA in the U.S.
Which you'd think would mean better security, wouldn't you?
You would think.
Mm-hmm.
But Compliance isn't always the same as strong security. You can check all the regulatory boxes, but still have weaknesses in your actual defenses.
Interesting distinction. Checking boxes versus actually being secure.
Right. And finally, the attack surface, meaning all the possible entry points for attackers, it just keeps growing. Think about telemedicine, all the connected medical devices, records moving to the cloud.
More doors and windows for attackers to try, basically.
Exactly. More potential points of failure.
Okay, so valuable data, maybe older systems, compliance, complexity, and just more ways in. It paints a pretty clear picture. So how are they getting in? Let's talk attack methods.
Well, the Ascension breach we discussed, the recent one, really highlights that third-party risk. Remember, it started with a vendor.
Right, the former business partner.
Yeah. And we found this statistic, I think it was from a May 9th post. Something like 98% of organizations have had a breach linked back to one of their third-party vendors.
98%.
I know.
That's almost everyone.
It's staggering. It really shows you can't just focus on your own walls anymore. You have to think about everyone you're connected to.
So vetting vendors, monitoring them continuously, that becomes critical.
Absolutely crucial. But it's not just third parties. Remember, Ascension had that other big breach back in 2024, the Black Basta ransomware one?
Oh, yeah, that affected millions, didn't it? 5.6 million records, I think.
That's the one. And that attack apparently started differently. It came from inside, from an employee downloading a malicious file onto their work computer, an endpoint failure.
Okay, so one attack vector is through a partner. Another is through an employee's device right inside the network. Shows the variety of threats they're facing.
Definitely. And the reports also mention specific types of malware being effective here, things like keyloggers and screen capture malware.
Right. Can you break those down a bit? Why are they so dangerous, especially in healthcare?
Sure. So keyloggers, they do exactly what they sound like. They secretly record every key you press on your keyboard.
Including passwords?
Including usernames, passwords, everything. They can be software installed silently, or sometimes even tiny hardware devices plugged in somewhere.
Okay, scary. And screen capture?
Screen capture malware or screen scrapers, they take snapshots or even video of what's on your computer screen.
So if a doctor or nurse is looking at patient records?
Exactly. The malware could be grabbing images of that sensitive data right off the screen from inside internal portals or electronic health record systems.
And I guess traditional antivirus might miss these sometimes.
They often can, yeah. Because this kind of malware might not look like a typical virus. It might hide inside legitimate software or just mimic normal computer activity. It's designed to be stealthy.
So if they steal login details with a keylogger, they can just walk right in the front door, digitally speaking.
Pretty much. They look like a legitimate user, which makes it really hard for standard security tools to spot them until maybe it's too late.
Which really underlines the problem with just trying to detect threats once they're already inside. Seems like you need to stop them before they get in.
Precisely. That older model of just detection and response, it's struggling against these kinds of attacks. We saw that with VectraRx weeks, potentially, before they confirm the intrusion.
So the shift needs to be more towards prevention.
Yes, exactly, towards proactive defense, particularly focusing on the endpoint.
Endpoint meaning the actual devices people use, laptops, desktops, tablets.
Yes, any device that connects to the network and accesses data. That's where many attacks either start, like the malicious download, or where the data gets stolen from, like with keyloggers and screen scrapers. So securing that point becomes incredibly important. It's about endpoint threat prevention.
Okay. And the reports mentioned Century Bay's Armored Client as one example of this kind of proactive approach. We're not, endorsing specific products here.
Right, not an ad.
But the types of features they talked about seem to directly counter the threats we've discussed. Things like anti-key logging.
Yep. Stops the keyloggers from capturing keystrokes in the first place.
And anti-screen capture.
Protects what's shown on the screen from being stolen by that kind of malware.
Okay, makes sense. And they mentioned blocking malicious DLL injection. What's that?
That's basically attackers trying to sneak their bad code into legitimate programs that are already running. Anti-DLL injection stops that.
Got it. And controlling screen sharing, too.
Yeah, limiting what can be shared or who can see it to prevent accidental exposure of sensitive data during, say, a remote support session or a presentation.
So if you connect those features back, anti-key logging stops the password theft, anti-screen capture protects the patient data being viewed, It really targets the methods attackers are using.
Exactly. It's about creating defenses specifically designed to block how these breaches often happen at the device level, rather than just waiting to catch the intruders later.
It really reinforces that idea that securing the endpoint, the device itself, isn't just a nice-to-have anymore.
It's really become what you might call a clinical imperative, especially with healthcare becoming so digital. Every single laptop, every tablet used by a doctor or nurse is a potential way in for attackers if it's not properly secured.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've covered a lot. What are the absolute key takeaways you think people should get from this?
I'd say, first, the scale and the sheer sensitivity of the data lost in breaches like Ascension and VectraRx. The impact on individuals is massive and long-lasting. Don't underestimate that.
Right, it's personal.
Very. Second takeaway. Healthcare is, and likely will remain, a huge target. Why? That valuable data, the legacy systems issue, and just the ever-expanding digital footprint, those factors aren't going away quickly.
Okay, persistent vulnerability.
Yeah. And third, the threat landscape is constantly changing. Relying only on detecting attacks after they happen isn't enough anymore. There needs to be a real shift towards proactive defense, especially focusing hard on securing those endpoints, the devices themselves.
Scale and sensitivity, persistent vulnerability, and the need for proactive endpoint defense.
Got it. That's a great summary.
Thanks.
So it leaves me, and hopefully you listening, with a final thought, maybe a question to chew on. Thinking about how connected everything is in healthcare and how sophisticated these attacks are getting.
Yeah.
What should you be asking your own doctors, your hospitals, your clinics?
Good question. Specifically, how are they handling those third-party risks we talked about? And what are they actually doing to secure the computers and tablets where your health information is being accessed? Those endpoint devices.
Yeah, those are really important questions for individuals to start thinking about, maybe even asking.
Definitely something to consider. Hopefully this deep dive gave you a better handle on the challenges and why this shift towards proactive security is so vital in healthcare today.
We hope so. It's definitely a critical area to stay informed about. This episode of the Endpoints of View podcast has been brought to you by Sentry Bay, home of the Armored Client, the world's most advanced endpoint protection. For more information, visit sentrybay.com.